Yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Rome Summit. Jason Griffin here. Happy as always to have you with us. We're looking forward to jumping into the Rome 101 session today. We're going to be focusing on how you can get all the most out of Rome using only the essential features. So this is going to be a great session for any of you out there who are maybe beginners with Rome, or those of you who are maybe like me, consider yourself a little bit less technical users, and you're looking to just maximize your use of the tool without having to get too fancy with all of the extensions and sort of exotic features. So really looking forward to jumping into that. I've got three awesome panelists with me here today, and they're very well-established members of the Rome community. So we'll give some quick intros there, and then we'll jump right in. So starting with RJ Nestor. RJ is a business and executive coach, a musician, and a writer based in Morgantown, West Virginia, here in the States. He uses Rome for productivity and task management, creative writing, and content creation. Zettelkasten, personal CRM, journaling, and all of his note-taking. So very robust use cases there for RJ. RJ has created 3 Rome courses so far: the Roaman Way, Your Road to Rome, and Powerful Task Management in Rome Research. He also offers one-on-one Rome coaching. RJ, welcome to the session.
Thanks for having me here today. Really happy to be here.
Yeah. Moving on to Ramses. Ramses is a teacher turned technical consultant from Amsterdam. He became obsessed with knowledge management as part of this career transition. Since February 2020, he's been using Rome to research and solve business problems. Today, he runs the very popular knowledge community RoamStack and also advises professionals on how to use Rome in their jobs. Ramses, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, we've got Jamie Miles. Jamie started on the Rome Scholarship after being unemployed by COVID. With the tool, he was able to publish content and produce products faster to build his startup. After hitting his 2020 goals, he made Rome Untangled to give back to the community, a very popular course so far been used by over 6,000 Romans. Today, Jamie is building a 21st century media company with a simple goal: find a better way to solve the problems that matter. Jamie, welcome to the Rome Summit.
Good morning, America.
Happy to have you all. Yeah, happy to have you all with us. And again, looking forward to jumping in. For those of you who are with us live this morning or afternoon, wherever you're at in the world, please feel free to use the chat, drop questions, comments in throughout. We would love to field those. With all of that by way of introduction, let's go ahead and jump right in. And we wanted to start today with really focusing on inputting information into the graph. This is where it all begins. You've got to be able to write and get that information in there and know kind of what you're doing at that basic level before you can get into all of the connecting and wonderful things that Rome can do. So I'd like to start here with Ramses. And Ramses, if I'm a new user to Rome, what sort of advice are you giving me about how to initially start getting my head around where to do my writing in Rome?
Yeah, I think the daily notes page is absolutely the best way or the best place to start. And don't overthink it. Absolutely don't overthink it. Just write. So whatever comes up in your mind is worth writing about. By the way, can you hear me well? Because I don't see the screen.
We can.
Okay, perfect. So maybe I can just show very quickly how I did the prep for this call, because I essentially throw everything into my daily notes because I don't want to think too much about organization up front. I just want to get things out of my mind. So it's really offloading my thoughts. So just quickly share. So here, I took some of the outline that you wrote for this session, and I just started to riff off them. And this is what I often do. So for example, I write a question up on top and I just riff off it. And as you can see here, for example, every thought that I have is just another block. So I really utilize the power of the outliner feature. I think that idea of Rome being an outliner enables you to just store one thought at a time. So every block is just one thought, and every thought that follows another one, I just nested it underneath. So that's basically it. And then have some links so that you have entry points for your ideas to rediscover them. So it's more thinking about how do I want to organize this and reframe it as where do I want to see this thought again, or when do I want to see it again? And that's basically it, because I'm not really good at planning with for structures, because I have terrible ADHD and my preferred structures always change, and I always think I have to reinvent the wheel. So only once I started, or once I stopped to impose structure and just freely write, that's the only moment that Roam clicked for me, and that I was able to actually use my notes. But I will keep it at that for now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to stay on that theme of daily notes and maybe come over to you, RJ, for a second. The daily notes I know are very popular. Lots of people in the Roam community really recommend starting there and really focusing and getting your head around how those work. I use them extensively personally in my graph, but one of the things that I struggle with is that they feel very ephemeral, right? So you open up your graph any given day and you've got a white page there that's completely empty, and everything you wrote the day before is pushed now out of sight. You can scroll down and find it, of course. But again, it feels very ephemeral. And I struggle with this voice in my head of like, oh, I'm going to lose this. Like this thought is going to disappear and I'm never going to be able to find it again. How do you teach people to think about the daily notes page?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, first of all, let me second just everything that Ramses said. I think he's right on the money with that. As far as it being ephemeral, it feels ephemeral, of course, because you get to the new day and it's a blank screen. And I always say, for people who are brand new to Roam, several times I've talked to people who I've said, you could really use Roam research, but talk to me before you do it, because you're going to get there and you're going to get to this blank page and you're not going to have any idea what to do because you're just going to be looking at this sort of empty space, and there's
Right.
and nothing's required. So what I encourage people to do is to make sure that if there's a relevant topic, if there's a relevant project, if there's a relevant person, or some other high level idea that is part of this thought, related to this thought, make sure you enclose that in the double brackets. So you are effectively then creating a page with that content. The reason daily notes are not ephemeral is because when you do that well, and when you indent well, and I have that video that a few people have seen about indent with intent that I created, that has to do with when to indent underneath things, how those ideas are related and how you build those connections but through indentation. If you combine that with page references, to some extent block references, but when you're just starting out, don't worry about that. The page references, those double brackets, those ideas are no longer ephemeral because you can find them, just like Ramses says, when you need to see them later. And so you're building those bridges to be able to come back to them later. I find, just to kind of tie that back to the daily notes page idea, there's a lot of liberation in not being concerned about finding this information later. So I actually very much enjoy the fact that Roam forces me into this new page every day, kind of idea, because it gives me the freedom to explore anew without worrying that those things are going to be lost. Worst case scenario, you can find things in unlinked references or via the pretty robust search that Roam has. Very few things are going to get untenably lost out in the graph somewhere, because you can find them that way even if you've forgotten to indent well or to page reference well. So I very much endorse what Ramsey said at the beginning. Start writing. Let your writing be your thinking instead of trying to think in advance about what your thinking ought to be. That's where I got in trouble trying to work in a lovely app. I don't mean to talk anybody down, but an app like Notion, where there's a sort of insisted upon hierarchy. But until I know what I'm doing, how can I build a hierarchy? And so Roam lets me both generate the ideas and the thoughts, but in the process, if there is a hierarchy to be built somewhere, I can do that in Roam, but I don't have to start my thinking from what's my thinking going to be. I can just start thinking and start writing. And the Daily Notes page is the place to do that because it lets you refresh that every day. So to keep it from being ephemeral, to tie back into your point there before I shut up, is that if you reference those pages and you indent it well, it's not going to get lost. But even if you forget to do that, you can still find unlinked references, and you can search so that it's not going to completely disappear off your radar.
Right, right. Jamie, I'd love to come over to you and actually stay on this topic of indentation. This is definitely one of the core features or functions, I should say, of Roam, that as soon as you start to kind of wrap your brain around the way that indentation works and how that's going to influence what shows up in linked references and how you find information later, that is one of the, unquestionably one of the keys to unlocking Roam and sort of getting your head around the tool. How do you teach new users to think about indentation?
It's just a mind map in my brain. So I think everyone is pretty comfortable with how mind maps work. You have an idea, and then you think, oh, this idea is related to this. And whenever you would mentally draw a line to connect to it, that's when I indent. And that intuition that is baked into us for just like how we think and create those relationships, that's how I go about indenting stuff. The only other way I use indents is when I want to have a side thought. So something that I do quite a lot when I'm writing, and this is a complete shift from when I would use normal word processors. So normally I do my writing in like Google Docs or Apple Notes, just because like it's on my phone, I want to get the idea down really fast. If there's a footnote, so I'm writing something and say, recently I wrote about an idea of thinking fast and slow, and that's by Daniel Kahneman. And I wanted to add a footnote for the reader. What I do is I have the passage of text that is going to be in the body of the article, and then I indent, and then I do hashtag footnote. I know we're not talking about tags, but what I can do then is filter out everything that's indented, and then I can't see it. So I have this extremely clean view of my document, but all of the nuance that I need for later, I can easily bubble up to the top. But when I get to that stage in the writing life cycle of where are all the footnotes, and it's typically when I'm in the flow of writing, I know my brain is immediately composing what the footnote is going to be. So I don't want to artificially break those apart and then come to do it later. And it's quite a nice way of making it flow with the creative process that feels slightly less artificial than what I was trained to do with like Google Docs and Microsoft Word. So yeah, mind maps, and then using them for kind of afterthoughts, adjacent thoughts.
Sure. Jamie, let's stay with you for a minute and zoom back out. So I know we went down the path of daily notes and indentation. Let's zoom back out to just writing in Roam in general. You've now taught a lot of people how to use Roam through your Untangled course. What are some of the basic principles that you feel are the most important for teaching a new user how to think in Roam? And do you have any visuals like Ramses had where you can kind of illustrate some of these concepts on a screen share?
Let me see. So writing in Roam, well, it depends what you're writing. So I bring up Daniel Kahneman because that, when we were talking about daily notes and how to use it, in Kahneman's book, he talks about thinking fast and thinking slow. So in a nutshell, the idea is when we're thinking fast, it's when we're in the flow of doing something. So when you're doing your 9-to-5 job and you're just in doing mode, that's when you're thinking fast. You're using pattern recognition to make quick decisions. When you're thinking slow, it's when you have a bit of time to reflect, and then you can actually get some perspective on the problem and go deeper and try find a better way. The daily notes is where I house all of my thinking fast, and I create or go into dedicated pages for when I'm thinking slow. So as a writer of like fiction and nonfiction, one of the things I use daily notes for is when I come across random ideas or I overhear something that is cute or funny or humorous. One of the examples I give in the course is I went to the barbershop. This is pre-COVID. Fortunately, London's opened up again, so I got a haircut fresh for Roam Summit. But like about a year and a half ago, before all this had happened, and there was this 16-year-old kid in the barbershop next to me, and the barber wanted to shave his face. And he said, do you want me to get rid of that? He said, no, this took me a whole puberty to grow this. And I was like, that's amazing. So that would be something I threw into the daily note because I want to offload it. And to Ramses' point and RJ's point about like this idea of like offloading, that would be where I would put daily notes stuff. And then if I'm writing a dedicated article, that would be where I create like a page, because I want to go deep into this topic and I want to link everything to that. So that would be a framework for how I would think about the difference between daily note and dedicated pages. In terms of visuals, come back to me.
Here I've got, so I think I've got a great way to kind of so just opening up my graph here, like you can see yesterday, right? So I love, by the way, Jamie, that framing of sort of thinking fast and slow. That resonates with me, and I saw that in your course, and I think that's a great way to think about it. So daily notes are often things that I just want to capture very quickly, so I'll throw them here. The other place that I really recommend users think about daily notes is anything that's kind of time-based. So two great examples here are your daily journal, right? Is an obvious use case if you're going to journal in Roam. Using your daily notes is a very logical place to do that. And then to the point about indentation, you can see that each one of these prompts that I'm using, I have set up as a page link, right? So what are 5 things that I'm grateful for? And then under that would be the 5 things, that I'm grateful for. I'm taking a little risk here, opening up the personal graph, but I don't think there's anything too sensitive there. And then to the point about indentation, right? All of this is nested underneath this page. So if I click on this page, then I can go to my linked references and I'll be able to see. It might take a minute to expand that, but I can see all of those things that are indented under there. So that to me is a great use case for using the daily notes page. And then I wanted to sort of contrast that with like, a project page like this, where I manage the Roam Summit, right? And I've got very static information that I know I'm going to need to come back to, and links and things that I'm housing. So I've got a dedicated page for that. And that wouldn't, to me, at least make a lot of sense to use the daily notes page for that. So I think it's a good way to kind of break it up is, those, when you're setting up a dedicated page, it's going to be for information that is more, I would say, permanent, like things that you're going to need to come back to multiple times. And then the daily notes can be a great place for just sort of capturing quick ideas. With that, I do want to shift gears, and I want to come to you on this first, RJ, and talk about connecting ideas. So you've got all of the information now. You're kind of in the rhythm of writing and putting ideas into your graph. How do you help new users understand some of the core concepts around how to connect ideas in Roam?
Absolutely. So, I touched on the fact that a lot of other apps, we're sort of conditioned by other apps to think hierarchically. We think we have to, this thing has to be put in this box, and this thing has to be put in this box, and I have to have that in advance to understand that. The way that Roam's connections work, there are a lot of different ways to build the lattice of the web of connections that Roam is. The first and most obvious is just putting a block on a page. That is a connection, because the page, and I apologize, I occasionally will have children screaming in the background.
That's all right. Hey, you and me both.
But that's an inherent connection, because the page is itself something that can be referred and referenced elsewhere. So a block living on a page, that's a connection. It may feel mundane, but it is a connection. Then anything that you indent, parent to child, is a connection. And really, page to block is the same relationship. The block that lives on the page is a parent-child relationship, just as indenting underneath is a relationship. Then we get to the more, intense things. In fact, I'll kind of pop this open here so you can see, if you don't mind my sharing. I'm going to share over from my demo.
The more the merrier.
Here. Absolutely. I just recently created a local graph for the first time, so I've been demonstrating things here. So if I just create a block on a page here, I have now created a relationship between April 24th and this block. That was the first thing I was talking about. Okay, and if I put a nested block beneath that, I've created a relationship between this block here, the block on a page block, and the nested block underneath it. Now, if I create here a page reference, I have created a relationship between this nested block and page reference in such a way that I can go over here to this other page and see the relationship built back up to the entire April 24th page and every block that was nested above it. If I then went back to this page and said, actually, you know what, I think this is more important to be a top-level block here, and I just, for the record, dragged and dropped that up there, and then I tab this and indent that under. Now when I go to this page, I don't have to do any clicking to see the relationships. They're there already because that's on the top level. And that's a relationship I use a ton. In fact, I could just jump over here and show you. I have here my typical meeting notes set up here. I always put the time in brackets too, and I always feel the necessity to explain that no, I don't have a use case for that yet, but maybe someday I'll want to know things that I did at 10, and so I'd rather have it than not. But the Rome Summit, and I do that. The names of the people I'm going to be meeting with. Obviously, I have my prep here. I also have my prep over in the sidebar. But by creating a top level block that has all of these relationships here now, I can view the relationships, anything notes I've taken about past Rome Summits. I can look at every conversation I've had with you. I can look at every conversation I've had with Jamie or Ramses, and I can go back through there by clicking with their pages. I had a conversation with Ramses on Monday. So I have notes from that conversation on Monday that I can use there. And since we're talking specifically about relationships, I won't dive into filters at the moment, how I would do that. But once you're talking about living on a page, referencing notes, and you can block level reference too, that I don't talk about that the very first thing with new users, and the ability to nest, you have 3 very different ways of creating those relationships there that are already interlinking and webbing things together in ways that wouldn't necessarily be possible in these other programs we've used that have forced us to think hierarchically, or it certainly wouldn't be anywhere near as immediate to be able to do it. I can just create this, double bracket page reference, and I immediately have a connection. And if later I decide, you know what, I don't want that connection, I can just delete the page reference. It doesn't need to be there anymore. It's so malleable. It can be in one shape, and then you just change a few connections, and all of a sudden everything is new, and the shape of things is new. That's one of the things that I want new users to understand too, is that in all of this building, we can feel like, oh, gosh, everything's lost, and I need to start over from scratch. It may not be that dire. The situation may just be that you kind of need to start, connecting things in new ways, and you get a new, fresh Daily Notes page today to do that. Start building the connections a different way, and as you reconnect with other material, page reference it differently, or remove a reference here, or move a block to this spot. It's because of the atomic nature of those connections, meaning how small, the individual block level ability of making those connections. It's very, very simple to allow Rome to take the shape of your thinking, and then as your work and your thinking change, to adapt Rome to the new shape of your work and your thinking. Rome will reflect that back to you if you allow it to. Hopefully that covers the idea of connections. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one point you made there that I would pause and just underscore a little bit is that idea of not worrying so much about getting it right the first time. I really struggle with this. I am very neurotic. I tend to be on the neurotic side of the spectrum. I like things to be tidy and orderly. And that was a really hard thing for me as I started first using Rome, to kind of embrace that idea of as limited as hierarchies and folders are, they are at least intuitive, because we've all been taught to use them for our entire lives. And Rome is this completely different paradigm where you really have to shift the way you think about that a little bit. And that's tough. So I think embracing the idea, or reminding yourself deliberately of the idea that you don't have to get it right the first time, and you can come back and modify things as you go, I think is really helpful. There was one question that just came in the chat. He said, when would you make a child bullet of a parent A versus putting that same child on the page of parent A? So instead of just going to the subject page and putting it right on the page, why would you nest it somewhere else? I think that's an important question. Can you touch on that really quickly?
I can. And so, this is similar to something that Jamie was saying a moment ago, as far as, where things, when something belongs on a Daily Notes page versus when it belongs on the page itself. And I think you were also saying that, Jason, in your illustration there. So my answer is, it depends. on the way. This is the challenge. Now you're talking to the person who does the Roam coaching, who's going to, just like Roam does for me, I'm going to reflect a lot of what you think back to you. And so, not knowing how your brain works, I will do my best to give a sort of as specific an answer as I can. For me, there's what I call a tipping point between when I want something to be in sort of brainstorming mode versus when I want something to be in organization mode, and which is extremely analogous, by the way, to thinking fast and thinking slow. Those are roughly the same things in my mind. That's parallel to that. So if I am in thinking fast mode, or I am in just brainstorming or gathering mode, and I'm on my daily notes page, I am far more likely to tag the page, indent under it, and take the note there, knowing that, and I'll share my page back here just to sort of illustrate that. So if I'm in, speed mode here, and I'm talking about the Roam Summit, and I'm like, I have Roam Summit as a page in my graph, by the way. But I'm taking a note here, and I'm saying, okay, fast and slow, and I want to do that. I just want to take that note here because I am, working in a hurry. I know that it's going to show up here in the linked references when I go to the Roam Summit page. So when I'm thinking in terms of just getting the ideas out there, I just want them to be gathered by those pages. And so by indenting underneath, I know that it's going to be safely gathered by that page and by anything else that I want to include in that. So if I want something to be, this is maybe a critical point as well, if I want something to be connected to two different things, or three different things or whatever, I can have them all in one block and indent underneath, and then whoever's page I wind up going to, I have access to that information for what I'm doing. With this, whether I would put it on this page relates very much to that thinking slow idea. So when I'm in organizational mode, say I was writing an article titled Roam Summit, I would want to then organize those ideas onto this page. I would probably do that via block reference from the original content so that I would still have a direct and connected link back to that. So I might say, I want to talk about, I right-clicked that, by the way. You can do it with some keyboard shortcuts as well. But you could come in here and I can do that, and maybe I can even, by clicking that, save it as a text and alias thing, and then write new text here without losing my connection to that. But that's sort of the tipping point for me is between whether it be calling thinking fast or brainstorming or whatever it is, between that sort of gathering mode and the organizational or drafting mode. If I'm in the first, I'm going to want to do that, just indent under a page, knowing that the page will successfully gather it. If I'm in the mode of thinking about drafting something or organizing something, I'm more likely to do that on the page. And that where that tipping point is for you may vary from where it is for me, but that's sort of the general mind space that I'm in when I'm thinking about that.
I love that framing of the tipping point, and I'm gonna I'll just share one more quick page from mine, and then I want to come over to you, Ramses. But I think to illustrate this point, so I've got this page, curiosity. That's just a topic that I'm generally interested in. And you can see here on the page itself, I've got a whole bunch of writing that I've done that's, in various stages of development, but it's relatively more developed as I scroll down this page versus when I get down to the linked references. And you can see down here, these are things that I've just quickly captured on other pages and nested under the curiosity page, because as I'm working, I think of some connection that I just want to make from my daily notes page or some other topic and quickly throw it in there. And then periodically I'm coming down here into these linked references and sort of pulling up the ideas that I want to further develop more. And I've heard several people in the Roam community talk about that idea of sort of pulling up information from the linked references section onto permanent pages. And I think that's a good sort of mental model to use here as well. Ramses, I want to come over to you and kind of zoom back out and just, how do you teach? You work with a lot of new users and you've developed a ton of great information on your site about helping new users get into Roam. What are some of the basic building blocks and concepts that you focus your teaching on when you're trying to help a new user get their head around connecting ideas?
Yeah, I've mentioned this at the start of the session. It's for me, the basic components is understanding the outline structure, understanding linking and how blocks link together. So you can link them together by indenting. We've talked about that. You can link them together maybe based on a page name, because essentially a page, it's nothing more than a collection of blocks. So I always try to teach the structure and really have people think in branches, and just follow, just try to find an approach that feels natural to you. I think that is the most important thing. So like I said before, I do as much free writing as possible, and I do thinking on the page instead of really planning it out. And the structure will emerge. And I know this will sound scary to many people, because they think if I just throw stuff in, if I don't think about organization, I'm never going to find it back. But that's not really true, because if you just link blocks, you can see where an idea originates. And maybe I can show something very specific, how
Please.
How I generally work when it comes to just developing an idea. So for example, here I am, let me see. Please bear with me for 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. By the way, while you're doing that, Angus made a comment in the chat related to the idea we were talking about a minute ago about sort of pulling up ideas. I think it's a great way to frame it. So while Ramses is doing that, I'll just sort of point this out. He talks about Maggie Appleton, who's another well-known member of the Roam community, thinks about ideas as sort of progressing from seedlings, which Angus is saying you could think of those as sort of the indented blocks that you're making from your daily notes page and other parts of your graph, through budding, which would be moving through that tipping point that RJ, you talked about, and then to evergreen notes, which perhaps is where you start pulling them up into more permanent pages, or maybe even making dedicated pages for them alone. And then the other thing that I want to point out here is that one piece of advice that I heard, and I'll credit Robert Hasefield, I heard him say this, I think it was on Twitter once, was if you're ever in that position where you want to get something written in your graph and you find yourself struggling with where do I write this, which this happens to me a lot, and his advice really helped me, just get it on the page first. So don't let the angst of trying to figure out where to put it stop you from capturing the idea, because you can just write it on the daily notes page, and then immediately when you're done writing it, you can start thinking about where to put it. So just that little shift of just whatever you do, just get the idea down first and kind of decouple that from where do I put this, was a really effective tool to help me kind of work through that. Ramses, back to you.
Yeah, and I think so I can also show a little bit how I do, for example, evergreen notes in a bit, but I first want to start with just riffing on something that you start somewhere and then track how it develops over time. So instead of keeping it vague, let's show something very specific. So in this case, and I'm a building a second brainer, so I still think of in ways of projects and areas, even though people who are familiar with building a second brain, I do regard my Roam graph basically as one giant box of resources, but I do structure stuff on a per need basis. So for example, I have a blog called Learning Worker Club, and I'm trying to explore ideas about how to use learning in a job, or how to look at your job through the lens of learning. So in this case, I didn't start out from my daily notes page. I wanted to already put it more in the context where I will be more working on it. But essentially here, I just have an article outline. I started out, so we go to article outlines. I have many different article outlines that are different stages of development. I don't worry too much about when I finish something, because this blog, it's essentially just letting the thinking emerge instead of really doing fixed projects. But If I click in, you can see that I have 5 references to this block. And why is that? Because every time I work on it, so for example, here I have in my to-do list, I link to this block. So instead of linking to a page and creating a page, I have all my outlines on one page, and even the drafts are on this page, but nested underneath another block, which enables me to quickly filter out anything that's not relevant while having everything that I'm working on in one context. Because if I'm working on this article, often I will have ideas for other articles I'm chipping away at. So that's why I like to keep them close. And then just for my task list, why do I reference this block? Because if I say outline, I can just click this block and it will take me to the outline. But when I'm drafting the article, I'm using as a parent block, I use a reference. Why? Because then I can track how it progresses or how it comes into existence over time. And that's how I look at linking. So this is something I just discovered by using it, by thinking, how can I quickly get to this piece of text where I want to continue working on without having to click 5 links. And I thought, why not just create a block reference and link it that way? So there is no real need to think upfront of how are you going to structure it, because if you look at my graph, probably I have 5 different structures running through each other, but it just works somehow because I always have my links. I always have the backlinks. So this is just the backlinks showing essentially. And I can always find what I'm looking for, what I need just by roaming my database. That is the basic idea that I just keep in mind. If I just click links and if I link stuff up, I will be able to find it. Maybe not through search, although that works wonders. I can just click around and find what I need. And then to come to the, let's see, I wanted to show something about how I think of, why I think of, or how I think of linked references. And so, for example, this is a book I'm working through. I'm really interested in Stoicism, and this is a book that looks at how do Stoicism and Buddhism, are they alike and how do they differ? And I want to have my own experience mixed with that. So, for example, I just take notes and I link to highlights. So these are all highlights that I took from the book. And then sometimes I think, oh, this is interesting. I will create a new note, which I call Zettel. And here you also see Maggie's system come back with the seedling. So this is just a budding Zettel evergreen note. I write a very short thought, and then I link it up. And what I then do is I basically just reference the blocks that inspired this little note onto the page. And why do I do that? Because I don't know if it's useful for anyone, but for me, I like to know where did this thought originate, or where did I see it for the first time? So I can create almost like a map of how my understanding grew, and I can just traverse it. So for me, it's this system. It's just so great to get lost in my own notes, in stuff that I've seen in the past, and then to start riff off what I thought in the past. So for me, that really is how my thinking compounds instead of just having them scattered around.
Right. I love that idea of having all of your outlines and things that you're working on one page. I've got a similar page in my graph that's called Synthesis Claims, which is from Joel Chan. If anyone follows his work, it's kind of where I've adopted my framework from. And that idea of having lots of different ideas on one page, and I can always drill in and click on the individual block. Like if I need to focus and I need to get all that other stuff out of view, you can click on the block and bring only that one into your working space. But I agree with you. Like I find having a lot of those ideas on one page is really helpful, because as I'm working on one, I'm often thinking of adjacent ideas related to other topics. And it's nice to not have to jump around, and you can quickly sort of bounce between ideas and do it that way. So I think that's all great advice. Jamie, I want to come over to you. And again, same kind of question that I had for Ramses. Let's zoom back out. You've again taught a lot of people how to use Roam at this point. What are some of the real basic and key ideas that you feel like people need to internalize in order to understand how to connect their ideas inside of Roam research?
So the example so my whole thing is to do deep thinking with a deadline. That's kind of what was the original premise of what I was trying to get at. And so with that, one of the key things is just how is writing different in Roam versus writing in a normal word processor? And then how can you the creative process is normally described as like this linear thing of like capture, synthesis, publish, but how can you create that as more of a circle? That's so often that when we're writing, we have all these leftover ideas. And one of the big things that was a game changer for why I moved from a hierarchical system of taking notes and publishing content to a more networked structure is just it accelerates things. And so instead of thinking more about the technical aspect of it and the tools and the techniques, I wanted to more share about the magic of like, what does that actually look like in practice? So if I just allow Zoom to share my screen in my system preferences, I'll be able to show you guys. There we go. Oh no, it says I have to quit Zoom. And
I get that error message sometimes. You may be able to still do it. If you give it a try, close that window out and give it a try, it might let you.
Okay, let's do share again. Oh, it looks promising.
Yep, there you go.
Okay, my screen.
Yep, you're good.
Disaster avoided. Great. Okay, so
indeed, yeah, go ahead.
And then I want to touch on this metadata point to what we were saying earlier, an idea of panic with setting up your Roam and how to just kind of mentally put all that stuff in cupboard and not have to worry about it. But I come to that at the end. So one of the great things when writing in Roam that I found is it's so subtle. It's just this thing. I love this. It gives me a high level view of what I'm writing. So I can easily go through the arc of the story I'm trying to tell and whatever I'm writing and move these blocks around really easily to see if the sequence makes more sense. And this is, I think, something really underappreciated with the magic of writing in a networked tool like this or an outliner, is just you can look at your piece from a big picture, and then you can zoom into all the little details as well by just expanding this and then looking at it block by block, and then moving into your different sections and then moving those around. So I would say for anyone who is writing or creating in Roam, this is one of the magical things, because before, the way it would work is you would cut and you would paste, right? You would have to move, and that's so painful. It's so annoying. So beyond the more advanced stuff of like embedding your notes, so you don't have to duplicate things, they live in more than one place any given time. That's one of the little, I call them, it's like a web of tiny little things that form a really big thing. So I'm going to show you another really tiny little thing that has been great for when I'm writing this sort of stuff. So if I go to my filters, you can see I've got this footnote tag that I mentioned before. So when it comes to adding all my footnotes to what I'm writing, when I'm near the end of the life cycle of the writing process, I can just surface all of those up. And then immediately I've got all these footnotes that I want to add that relate to this piece in the article. Super fast, really easy. I don't have to worry about it, which again accelerates. It stops me being pulled out of the actual writing process with the admin. And the whole thing of deep thinking with a deadline is trying to make everything really process light so it works with you rather than against you. And when it comes to you've published it and you want to close the loop, there's so much that I write that I think is a really good idea, but this isn't the right article for it. And I just very simply call this my leftovers. So this article I wrote has 3 leftovers, and you can see them here. So now if I go to the leftovers page, everything I've written, you can see all of these leftovers, and this is all fertilizer for future pieces that I might then write down the line. And that's, maybe I'm doing it wrong. this is like a very simple way in which I found, oh, I just need one tag. It's called leftovers, and it gives me all this benefit. And then what I can do, we kind of mentioned like, you can like pull this up in the sidebar, right? And you could just be like, oh, that's a really good idea, and just drop that into unknown article. And you can start having an outline of ideas that can start being the fertilizer for something that you want to put together. Because I find that there are all these ideas, but I can't figure out how to thread them yet. But when I kicked it around in the can in my head for a while, they thread themselves. And what's really nice about the self-organizing pieces, it just never gets lost. And before, in the world of Evernote, like, where would I put that? Where would I put this? I think every writer has this. There are some sentences I'm like, mwah, they're beautiful, but I don't know where to put them. And it feels like a shame to throw them away. And now I don't have to feel like I'm orphaning them and leaving them at the orphanage and hoping that somebody picks them up one day.
Yeah, I have an identical thing called the cutting floor is what I call it. So I have a heading at the bottom that's called the cutting floor, and same exact thing. I love this sentence. I love this paragraph. It's just not working for this article, so I'm going to move it down there. And I've also found that it removes a lot of the sort of angst associated with what to do with that idea. I can just put it down there, and I know it's, you know, in a place where I can see it later, and then I can get back to writing.
So actually a really cool potential thing that you might find interesting, I'll show you on this, but for anyone who collaborates with other people as well. So I do these really like, it's just drawn on my iPad. I then copy it and I paste it in. And this is the diagram that will go with this idea. And I nest this under, because if you imagine the mind map, it's like this block idea is connected to this image. So I nest that. And then I can always collapse this if I just want to see the text, because it's nested under. I'm pretty sure I pressed that. Oh, no, too much. I wanted the next one. So then now I can just see like the block. And if you imagine as being clean, I have this tag called props that I use. And prop is just, I do filming as well. So prop is just any visual. So it might be, this is the transition I want to do, or this is the image that goes with it, or this is when I have to make like a physical prop for something that I'm filming, like a mini Stonehenge, say. I would just do hashtag prop. And then typically what I do is I tag my buddy who helps me out on this. So I go to all my props and I can just quickly surface those up. And what's great is as you move through the life cycle of your creation process, because you've already added all those tags as you were thinking about them in the moment of writing, you don't have to go back and do them. And you also don't have to create like multiple checklists and like other, like building products or creating things or creating films. There's this constant checklist that you have to go through. The nice thing is you make all of them as you go through. So with props, if I have published this article, it's like all good. And now I just want the final bit of props to then add the images. I'm now at the end of the writing life cycle. I just do the prop filter, and you can see I've done hashtag Jane Austen. Their name isn't actually Jane Austen, but I can't actually put their real name on this. But the person I work with who helps me think through the visual design, they can then go into the graph, click their name, and then all of the props that they need to do, the baton is immediately handed over to them. So I guess my thing is more, instead of going into the techniques and the tools, I want to talk a bit more about the magic of what you can do with this. And I'm hoping with those 4 examples, it really communicates why this is going to accelerate things for you. Not necessarily Roam. I'm slightly less dogmatic about the precise tool you use, more just about network note-taking as an upgrade to folder structures or hierarchical, however you prefer to think about it. So those would be my thoughts on this. There's one downside to doing this, which is when you come to publish your piece, right? I don't know if anyone's heads are like shouting at me for that. When you come to publish this or you export it, all of these things that you've nested underneath, they come up too, including all my footnotes, because there's no, I've told Roam this and they said that it's on the roadmap. So fingers crossed. But if you apply a filter and then you export something, it doesn't get rid of all of the things you've indented. It will just export everything as markdown. And of course you convert that to a doc. But something that I started to experiment with was just creating a query. And this is a very simple, I'm not like a super query user. I'm very like 80-20 in how I use queries, but it works. So it's just like we've thrown a query. And for this one, it's an AND query. And what I want to do is show all of the props. Actually, let's look at the footnotes, right? Because I don't want the footnotes in the main article. And then the page that I want here is just the name of this page that I'm on. So this is part 2. If I click out, you can then see, if I get rid of this filter here. So this is my query, right? What's really cool about this is now it's surfaced all of my footnotes in this piece. I can highlight each one of those and cut it. And now they're all removed from the article. And then I can just paste it into a little section down below, which could be called footnotes. And then they're there. And it's all completely extracted. So when I come to actually like publish or want to export a clean version of it, it's all clean, but it didn't slow me down. And I got all the advantages that I was describing before. So in my brain, I think of it like a giant magnet, and queries for me are like magnets. And then if you want to put them back in, you just press undo a couple of times, and then they're all thrown straight back in where you wanted them.
Interesting.
So that might help you instead of like you.
Yeah.
What you described, it was like you're doing it as you go through and writing. But if that's getting in the way and adding friction in a way that you don't like, use this magnet of a really simple AND query.
Yeah. No, I like that idea. I think that's a really interesting one. I had never thought to use queries like that. So appreciate you sharing that. I noticed that one other quick thing I want to touch on with you here is the metadata block that you have there. And I noticed you're using soft line breaks. So you've got a whole bunch of different tags up there used, but they're all in the same block. Talk a little bit about the thought process behind having all of those links sort of densely interlinked into one block.
Yeah, so in Roam Untangled, I outlined very clearly, like, this is the advantages of doing it in a soft way, as you see here, and this is the advantages of doing it in a hard way. So you guys can choose. The reason I prefer the soft approach to this is, if I click on writing, you can see some things. I really like these cards, and that's how I think about them. So I can scroll through. So it was my company's first birthday. We survived 365 days. We didn't go under. So I wrote a piece about that, and I can glance at this and go through. And you can see, I need to actually up the tagging on these, but the keywords here, this is what I call the big picture. So if I go to my writing, I can see the big picture themes around what each of these pieces are talking about. And that's really helpful if I then want to filter and say, I only want to look at the stuff that is talking about note-taking, say. So I've got 2 articles here that are specifically at the big picture level, they would be about note-taking. So that's why I prefer the soft line breaks, because I can see this stuff at all of this relevant adjacent information in a card form. And the reason why I've indented the metadata, so it's maybe a nuance that wasn't completely obvious before, I've actually indented my article underneath the metadata rather than making it equal. And that's what I call the little picture. So actually, if I go to the Roam Untangled version of this, it will be easier to show. So go to my reading page. So this is one of the examples that I give in the course to kind of make it obvious, like the advantage of structuring your metadata like this. I don't actually get that one. So you can see at this level, we've got keywords. This one's about sleep, discipline by design. But let's say we want to go to Bitcoin. There's this piece that comes up, but at the keyword level, there's nothing about Bitcoin about that piece, right? So where is it coming from? It's coming from the note that I made that was down here, where I spoke about Bitcoin. So this is what I call the little picture. So that way I can bubble up at the individual block level this idea of Bitcoin that is buried deep within this book that I read by Berlo on money laundering, something that I care a lot about, not the doing of, the prevention of money laundering.
Glad you clarified that.
and so I'm able to, in my own writing, bubble up little picture ideas and the big picture ideas. And I use softline breaks because I want these cards, because then I can pivot around every single one of these items. Whereas if they were hardline breaks, if I'm looking at reading on its own, I would only have keywords coming up. I wouldn't be able to pivot around author at the same time as status, as the same time as date read. So those are that's like the design thinking around that was, the faster I can sift through my ideas and see the big picture and little picture, the faster I can start doing and writing, because I can then connect those ideas to then come up with new ones.
Got it. Cool. Well, thank you for that, Jamie. This was all, those are super helpful tips. So I want to, we're running up on our time here. So I want to zoom out to kind of close things up and put you guys all on the spot just a little bit. A question I always like to ask at the end is, if there was one piece of advice that you could give a new Roam user who is just getting started with the tool and wants to get some traction, what would that be? I'll start with you, Ramses.
I'll cheat a little bit and combine the 3 into 1. So it's right on your daily notes page, link and indent. That's all you need.
Very good. Keep it simple. RJ, same question to you.
So I endorse what Ramses said, but I'm going to go a slightly different direction with this. My wife was saying to me the other day, oh, you know, with the work she's doing, she wants to be learning to use Roam. And she said, but I'd watch you use it, and I'm scared to death when I watch you use it because it looks so intense. What you all just watched here was a bunch of people who have been working in Roam and learning in Roam and thinking in Roam and designing our own things. And we're all what I call power users in our own graph. But if I went and tried to work in Ramses, it would take me some time to orient myself to what was going on in there, because now I'm living in his thoughts. So my tip to you is, by all means, model and learn. And of course, I sell courses, so of course, come learn from me. Yeah, but find the people that you can model things from and learn that, but work in it on your own and let Roam come to grips with your own way of thinking. Don't be afraid of doing that, because it will come over time that it will shape to what you're doing. But if you look at what any individual one of us is doing, it's like, oh my God, there's so much going on. Well, so much is going on because we've discovered and we've learned and we've done. Do the same. That's my advice. Do the same.
Very iterative process, and there is no one right way to do it. Super
Correct.
Cliched to say that, but 100% true. And it's sort of like, I call it the Roam paradox, right? It's so powerful because it's so flexible, but it's also can be really inhibiting for people to get into because of that flexibility. So I think that's great advice. Just kind of get in there and start working and let your particular needs and your particular use cases kind of drive where you focus your learning efforts. Jamie, same question to you. What's one piece of advice for new Roam users?
In 3 words, keep it ugly. So one of the things on my course is there's live chat. So what's really fun is those of these people who are trying out Roam, they send in lots of questions. And then they're like, are you a robot? I'm like, no, I'm actually just having breakfast. And one of the main things that comes up is, do you have any CSS that you recommend? And you may have noticed in my database, mine's really ugly on purpose. Because the more we have this really weird habit as humans, maybe it's just me. The more I realize I can push against the world and it will change, the more I want to push against the world and change it. So in my Roam, when I did add CSS, I was like, oh, what if I made this more beautiful? Or like, what if I added this cool like visual? But all those things were actually distracting me from what I wanted to do, which was to publish content and improve my thinking. So I would recommend, more as a avoidance of a pitfall, is to just keep it ugly. So when you get to the stage where you are like in your rhythm of Roam, then start thinking about maybe CSS or extensions. But the fundamentals of Roam are already, like what Roam is out of the box is already super powerful and super helpful. And the ugliness, I hope they don't mind me saying that, is a feature, not a bug. So that would be just like my slight change in framing.
Keep it ugly. I love that. I think that's great, great advice. So this was awesome. Thank you all three. Very quickly before we close things up, want to come around the horn. If viewers want to find out more about you or follow your work, what's the best way for them to do that? Ramses, I want to come to you again first. And I also want to mention, as you're answering that, there was a question in the chat earlier that I couldn't get to regarding your CSS template and if that was something that was publicly available.
Yeah. So first, to answer that question, it's called Masonry. It's called by I think Murph is his nickname, and Abhay. And Abhay, he created this particular one. I think it's called Masonry Dracula. So it changes at night automatically to a dark mode, which I really like. And it allows me to have all these cards, all these pages as cards in the sidebar instead of them organized vertically. Well, where can people find me? So all of my focus is on RoamStack. So that is a community of power users. So if you are looking to close the gap between the basics and want to do more in Roam, and you notice that, hey, out of the box, Roam is not capable of doing this, there's a very rich plugin ecosystem, but it's a little bit difficult to navigate because so many people just create plugins and then post it to maybe Twitter or their blog. So my job is to bundle all of these plugins and document what is not documented and help people create their workflows in Roam. So that's roamstack.com where people can check it out.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ramses. RJ, what's the best place for people to connect with you?
Sure. I'm at RJ Nestor on Twitter, so you can find me there or through the DMs. On my YouTube channel is RJ Nestor Coach. And I also have, if you just go to rjnestor.com or courses.rjnestor.com, you can find some of my content there and so forth. That's probably the easiest way to find me.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Jamie, same question to you.
Given it's Roam 101, there's a free course you can do for all the essentials on Roam. Type into Google or your preferred search engine, Roam Untangled. It will come up. As mentioned at the beginning, I started off as a Roam scholar, and finding my feet for 12 months in Roam came up with an approach to just finding your feet too in Roam. So if you want the 20% of the features for 80% of the benefits, check that out. You'll get started for free on that. Roam Untangled, that's where to find me.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And speaking of connection, if you're looking for ways to connect with the Roam Summit, got 3 ways for you to do that here. Number 1, subscribe.roamsummit.com. So if you're on today's call and you're not already subscribed to that email list, be sure to do that. I send out session notes with links and additional resources, as well as, of course, updates for future sessions. So be sure to get signed up for that newsletter. Also at Roam Summit on Twitter. And lastly, jason@roamsummit.com. Shoot me an email. Love getting that feedback. If you have any ideas, suggestions for future sessions, or if you want to come on and be a panelist on a future session, or just any comments, feedback at all, love to hear from you. So again, thank you everybody for being here today. Ramses, RJ, Jamie, thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
This was so much fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
great.
awesome.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you guys joining. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks again for being here.